We don't need much more detail. I think we need the continuous use of the factual data we have to make everybody convinced of the seriousness of the matter.
Hello, everyone. This is the Space Cafe podcast, and I'm Markus. Imagine you could talk to planet Earth, just like you would to someone close to you. Ask her how she feels, ask her what's happening deep beneath her oceans, or how she feels about our global shift toward electric vehicles. Ask her if it's okay to build that road that seems so desperately needed. How would that make you feel about the planet? Would you care for her differently? As strange as this may sound, it's at the heart of one of the European Space Agency's most ambitious initiatives to give our planet an interface we can finally understand. Welcome to Earth observation and to the mind-boggling project of building a digital twin of our world. Think of it, a living virtual Earth inside a supercomputer, fed a 24/7 data stream from a fleet of satellites, measuring everything from the temperature of the seas to the health of our forests. But this digital twin isn't just for watching, it's a sandbox for our future, a place where policymakers can test new green initiatives and simulate massive projects. It's a way to ask the Earth, if we do this, what happens next? And see the consequences before the first stone is ever laid. Today, my friends, I sit down with the woman leading this monumental effort, Simonetta Cheli, Director of Earth Observation Programs at the European Space Agency. We'll explore how this digital twin isn't just a scientific marvel, but a new way for humanity to finally get an answer when we ask our planet, hey, is it okay if we do this to you? So before we get started, please always remember, if you want to share something, if you want to get in touch, please write into us at podcast@SpaceWatch.Global. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Simonetta Cheli to the Space Cafe podcast. Let's go. If you had to sell Earth observation to a high school student in one sentence, what would you say? What would it be?
It's a tool to better live on our planet. So we build satellites. We distribute the data from those satellites to have better air quality, to understand better what we do in terms of deforestation, also the cities in which we live, how to build them with green areas, how to go and put the right cream and sunshot when you go on a beach. What do you need as protection? How to best sail or go to the mountains, making sure there is still snow in this context of evolution of ice and ice melting and climate change. So we're really facing challenges which face all of us citizens on the Earth, youngsters and less youngsters. And those challenges we can meet, support, and we can also organize how to better act with the satellites that we're building. And we build those satellites since 50 years. So we have an expertise, we have good data available, and we have quite a good understanding of how the Earth looks like now. We see the melting of the ice, we see the ice melting, but not only, we see the sea level trends, with ocean increasing their heights. We see deforestation, but today you don't just need to know how the Earth looks like. You need really to know how the Earth would look like if we don't act, if we don't take a very strong action in terms of preserving what we have on the planet today.
This is truly, truly fascinating. It's like when you look yourself into the mirror in the morning, you look at yourself and you immediately get a feedback if you're sick, if you're healthy, if something needs attention. And this is, if you use that analogy, this is something that the European Space Agency with the Twin Earth project is trying to achieve for an entire planet. So we're looking the planet into the mirror. Is this an analogy that could work?
It's an analogy because today what we know is the state of the art, the health of our planet. So we know that there was 9 gigatons of ice lost between the 60s and 2020. We know that there is an sea level trend which is passing from 3.5 millimeter per year to 4.8, which is not all even around the Earth, but it's an average of sea level rise. These are things we know. But what we're trying to do now, we're trying to use the data that we have in terms of have evolutionary models. What happens if there is 1 degree temperature increase? How much ice would melt more? How would we live on a city if we reduce our car use? Or, today we have 500,000 people dying every year for air quality in Europe. We have 7 million people in the world dying due to bad air quality. The satellites we have, the satellites we operate, the satellites that we are building for the future generations are really essential to give all this factual information, go beyond the dimension of national borders, give us elements that give us a view of how it's been evolving, but also how it will evolve. And I think no matter if you look also at food security, we need to feed 9 billion people on the earth. We need to know how much you can produce in terms of crop production. We have products that we are building today called walled cereal, which are also used on the market, on the stock exchange, to understand how much food will be produced. And this is essential information for all of us. We also use those data sets, for example, at the start of the Ukrainian war. We had data sets on Ukraine because we've been working on crop and yield estimates in Ukraine before the war. And it was not accessible, Ukraine, at the start of the war. And we could have estimates of how much would be the crop production estimate for the next 6 months. And those data we gave to organization like OECD, or really to have a common understanding of what would be the loss and what you would be missing in that context of production, which is essential for everybody in that context. Same thing you can do on water resources basin. For example, we've been looking at the Aral Lake for decades, and you know how much this has been shrinking. We've been looking at the expansion of deserts, and these data sets, they need to be looked at long period of time. So you need satellites that have consistent information with instruments on board that are either lasting long period of time or their repetitiveness basically is guaranteed. So you have series of satellites like in Copernicus where you launch one, it lives 7-10 years, and then you have another one that will give you the same information. Because when you talk climate change, when you talk these topics, which are relevant for all of us, you need to have data sets of about 20, 30 years minimum to have estimates of what's happening and what's really the situation that we're living.
So what's the data set we already have? Because the Copernicus fleet, they go back quite a bit already. So what time span do we already have, and what is optimal for ideal predictions into the future?
So the optimal for those expert scientists who work on climate variables, which are those indicators giving us the relevant information about the climate evolution, no matter if it's on air quality, sea level rise, deforestation, they all use data sets of about 30 years. In ESA, we started to launch the first satellite in basically the meteorological satellites at the end of the 70s, but the first Earth observation satellite of ESA was launched in early 90s. So what we have today is already from our European satellites a very good wealth of data available. But not only, we have agreements with partner agencies of the world, with the Indians, the Americans, the Argentinians, the Japanese, that have also their missions. And we have those in our archives at ESA through arrangements that we have. So we have a very, I would say, wealthy data set provision to support everything that needs to be measured, but also evolutionary process. And then we have the Copernicus family. Of course, we launched the first Copernicus satellite. It was called Sentinel-1A with a radar on board in 2014. We now have launched the 1C. Last December, we will launch the 1D, so the fourth of that series of satellite, very relevant ones in October this year. So we have already in that family of satellites a lot of different missions with different instruments on board. 1D has radar, but 2 has optical instruments on board, or we have Sentinel-5P, which is a precursor to Sentinel-5 that we will launch now in August with METOP second generation that gives us quality of the atmosphere. So really quality of the air that we breathe every day. Those informations are available. They're available for everybody, for scientists, for citizens, but also for young startup companies that want to make business out of that. And that's really important because you can do a lot using those data sets in terms of organizing products and services in many domains, no matter if it's energy, transport, environment, climate, agriculture. So the value of this data goes really well beyond also the value that it has for preserving better our Earth.
There is lots of companies currently pressed to talk about carbon offsets and sustainability measures. So would that mean that once the Earth observation, the twin Earth, by the way, it's called DestinE, right? Is that right? That's the project's name because I missed to label it properly. So DestinE is...
We have 2 projects that we're running. One is DestinE, which is a project that is under the leadership of the European Commission in the context of the digital agenda. And this project is run on behalf of the Commission between ESA, jointly with EUMETSAT, the European Meteorological Agency, and ECMWF, the European Center for Medium Weather Forecast. And that is one aspect of the project, which is really enhancing the use of digital technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, so valorizing the wealth of the data we have. And then there is the ESA component, which is a complementary project, which is focusing, as ESA does, more on the R&D elements, the demonstration elements. Those 2 projects are fully complementary. We work in full synergy, and we actually manage at ESA both a part of DestinE and our digital twin of the Earth. How do we do that? We do it through the selection of a number of topics. We have made for Digital Twin of the Earth a call. We got over 80 proposals in terms of topics to be covered through that call, and we're now working on 8 topics. We also worked on an initial demonstration project where we basically did 2 things. We looked at the evolution, the digital twin of the Antarctic region, and we looked at the digital twin of the Mediterranean. So we had 2 demonstration projects where we could integrate data into evolutionary model of those 2 regions. And now with the Commission, we're working on extreme weather events, and we're working on climate extreme situations. And those are just the initial activities. We are working also on digital twin of the oceans, which is something that is also very interesting to look at. And you can do digital twins on many different fields. You can have a digital twin at the end of a city. You can better manage a city if you know how it will look like if you intervene.
To connect to what I was going to say earlier, in an ideal world, once the Twin Earth project is up and running at its optimal stage, a company could say in real time what their carbon emissions do to the region the company is in, or even further to the continent or to the planet, in how far carbon emissions or any kind of emission affect the environment. Is that right, or is that too overly ambitious?
You're already a next step ahead. That's what we will try to do for sure in the future. For the moment, what we're doing a number of dedicated action on carbon and carbon emission. For example, we're building dedicated specific satellite called CO2 in the context of Copernicus, which were conceived to respond to the implementation of the agreements of climate, the COP of COP21 of Paris. Because in Paris, in the agreement, there is the plan and the ambition to do every 5 years what is called global stock take. And this global stock take that was already made in 2023, the first time, next time is going to be in 2028, is telling us how much anthropogenic emissions are impacting in terms of CO2 emissions on our daily life. So we did find technology solution to monitor the implementation of those international environmental agreements on climate. And we are building those satellites, and they will be launched shortly, and they will contribute to the stock take. Another thing we're doing, we just launched a satellite called Biomass. We launched that satellite. It's a science satellite on the 29th of April. It's already operational, but it will be fully operational with data distributed to everybody early next year. So after 6 months commissioning, which is quite a standard practice when you launch a new satellite to check the functionality of the instruments and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So this satellite is fabulous also for CO2 because it's a satellite that looks at the capacity of tropical forests to absorb CO2. And until today, we only knew how much total was absorbed by tropical forests. We didn't really understand the details of how in a tropical forest, a leaf actually absorbs 1% of CO2, the trunk about 75% of CO2, and the roots the rest of it. And now we have, with this new satellite, a capacity to scan, to have a sort of a 3D vision of tropical forests, which actually play a very key primary role in terms of CO2 absorption and in terms of CO2 fluxes overall and regulation of CO2 in the earth. Also, we are organized a ground truth validation, which is very important because satellites are important to understand how it looks like, but you need to make sure that what you measure is actually corresponding to what is on the earth. And in the case of biomass, for example, we've made 100 agreements with 100 ground places in the world, 2 in French Guiana, 1 in Australia, and in all over the world in tropical forest area, including in Latin America, but also Africa, so that we have people on the ground and really experts validating and verifying that the measurements that we take on those CO2 measurements, absorption capacity from the biomass measured, are really corresponding to what's happening on the ground. And this is a fascinating work that it's going to be also done and organized for ESA on CO2 emission and carbon fluxes. So there's a lot of work which is done on this topic and on many other topics. And of course, all of this is meant not just to be science, is meant to be operationally used by the key users that need to have the information. And you mentioned the companies. But of course, the Green Deal in Europe has targets, very clear targets of CO2 reduction overall. And it includes the responsibility for everybody, including companies, to do that. So the more you can measure that overall, the better it is, I think.
This is truly inspiring. In how far does this project have a potential to give Europe, to give the European Union a standalone position in the international space engagements and endeavors? So Earth observation could be the European USP in a global context of space engagements. But I see or understand Europe is not the only one trying to build that digital twin of Earth. But where do you see Europe in all of this? Are we still leading that race?
I think we are not just leading that race, we are in a primary leading position in this worldwide context. And we are even more in this geopolitical context evolving, where there is strong disengagement by some partners, which were traditional partners like the US, on topics like climate, on topics like sustainability, food security, and you name it. And I think not only we were already in a leading position because of the number of missions we had up and running. Today, ESA, the European Space Agency, is managing 16 Earth observation missions. We are building 40 satellites, and we're preparing about 80 missions. So already Europe is a reference actor with ESA, with EUMETSAT, with the European Commission, and also the national missions. And we're looked not just as a reference model, we're looked as a primary actor in terms of number of missions, number of data available, 300 terabytes of Copernicus data available every day. So we are being looked as certainly a model in the context of the wider geopolitical arena, also for numbers and for availability of data. And we have the biggest wealth of data available to support challenges like climate challenges, environmental challenges, resilience challenges, sustainability ones. And I think also there is a very strong teaming up, which you can see between actors like ESA, who are technology organization, research organization, industry supporting organization, and policymakers. We work very closely with DG Clima at the European Commission level. They're preparing legislation. But you cannot implement the legislations if you don't have the tool to check that what you put in a legislation is actually implemented right. So I think Europe is also very strong.
So you could sandbox.
Yeah. Very strong on that. So we are a key actor also in the support of the implementation of European legislation, but international convention. We in ESA, we work not just to support climate change, in the context of COP, we work to support all the environmental legislation and conventions, the Biodiversity Convention, the Ramsar Convention, the one on desertification. So there's a real strong collective effort of Europe and a leading role of Europe in this wider context with leading tools and capabilities that we need to sustain, but we need to preserve, I would say.
What is happening right now by adding ever more satellites and data points to Earth observation, what we're doing as humans, as a technological society, we're digitizing natural events. So we're translating it into machine language. So in a next step, it would only be natural to connect all this to artificial intelligence and ask artificial intelligence, hey, ChatGPT or whatever you work with, we want a cleaner Earth. What do we have to do? Is this a long-term vision, or is this something you would rather not touch for all the downsides it could entail?
No, I think it's not even a long-term vision. It's quite a short-term ambition of the programs we put on the table of our member states. For example, on the domain of resilience, there was the events in Poland with the flooding recently. There were the events in Valencia with the flooding recently, in Emilia-Romagna in Italy. So this is happening more and more. What can you do? You can use Destination Earth to provide policymakers to look at scenarios in a virtual environment, to look at improving the accuracy and the effectiveness of strategies for climate adaptation, but also for risk mitigation, for disaster risk reduction. Just to make you the Valencia example. Valencia happened because there was an extreme weather event. Meteorology had forecasted that, but all the elements had not been aggregated in the sense that we have looked afterwards at the humidity of the terrain, and the terrain, the soil moisture of the terrain around Valencia was already full with water. The hydrology of the terrain was already to the limit when it rained extremely hard, and the situation got absolutely, terrific, as we know. Now, the type of things that we're trying to do is to integrate the data sources we have, which was probably on the previous situation of the terrain, combining with the meteorological forecast, combining with what could have happened in terms of disaster evolution on that area. And in those ways, you can mitigate disaster reduction. You can also simulate droughts, which can have an impact on famine in the world. Those are the type of things that I think are not far-fetched from what we are doing and what we are really trying to improve in our daily work with space data, with all what we do.
So it's interesting, but you could, for example, now talking about AI again, AI requires lots of energy, we know. So maybe some time down the road, Europe needs to decide, do we want more nuclear power plants to power AI data centers, or should we rather go for coal or renewables? And so then you could now sandbox all the different options I just mentioned and talk about outcomes and make policy suggestions. Is that right?
Yes, it's exactly right. And by the way, we just recently opened a high computing facility capability in one of ESA sites, Esrin, where I am near Rome. We have looked at the energy consumption in a very thorough way. We have made deal with energy providers. We have looked at using solar energy, sources. We have looked at also optional ways to reduce the energy consumption for that facility. So it's something which is really coming up into our daily work, where at ESA we're not just looking at preserving the planet, we're also looking at how to really be sustainable in our daily work. We look at sustainable sites where we work. We look at greening the places where we work. And this is part of our daily agenda, which has to be an agenda of reference, I think, for everybody in Europe and the world. But AI certainly has various dimensions. One is the one you mentioned. The other one is the advantage of being able to use fast and access and exploit fast big volumes of data. And this is really something very valuable in the domain of Earth observation, in the domain of space in general. But you have maybe also some counter elements. For example, we are looking seriously these days of how to give the guarantee that what is being elaborated with the AI correspond to truth in the case of satellite data sets. That it's not just invented by the AI, but the products that you have, it's really corresponding to what you need to see. If you have a map of an airport, if you have a map of a city, if you want to buy a house in an area, it's something that... So we're looking also at giving a rubber stamping mechanism of demonstration of how you can give a quality stamping sourcing associated to AI and the use of biodata. These are examples of how we are declining, or we're looking at AI on board some satellites. So we launched last year a satellite called FISAT-2, and this satellite called FISAT-2 has an AI on board, and the AI on board allows to actually detect the cloud areas from the ones which don't have cloud even before you download and you dump the data to the ground. So it really pre-selects those data and those images that you can use, and those that you cannot use because they're covered by clouds, you don't even take and bother to download to the Earth.
How far are we from real-time global what-if simulations? So I guess it's not real-time yet, but how far? So what's the time delta still at the moment?
But in some areas, as I tell you, we worked a lot on Antarctica, on Mediterranean. You have basically real-time evolutionary schemes and models. Today, you see that the Mediterranean, you have the highest temperatures ever measured in the last few months. And not only we have the highest temperature measured in the Mediterranean in the last few months, which are factual, things, but you have the potential evolutionary information that is being elaborated by our scientists and by our experts on that.
What is the most surprising result from Earth observation that you have seen, that you were surprised by the most?
Well, there's so many which are not just surprising. I think they're fantastic. I've been looking at images from this very complex mission called EarthCare, which we launched last year. It took 18 years to develop. Everybody was like really anxious to get the data, and the data are about what is the filtering role, I'm oversimplifying, of clouds and aerosols from the sun radiation effect. And the images from the 4 instruments on board this mission, which are combined in terms of results. So you combine scientific results of the 4 instruments on board, just give us the capacity of filtering that the clouds have, which today in this context of increased temperature, it becomes essential. So they're not just surprising, they're fabulous, I think. And these are really relevant. Or other things which you can see is sometimes what you don't really see with your eye. And with these satellites, you often see things. I think of a satellite called Sentinel-2. It has an optical instrument like a camera on board, but this optical instrument has 13 spectral bands. So you really see the coverage of a forest or agriculture fields or crops completely in different colors. And you see forest in red, and you wouldn't expect forest in red. So these are surprising things to someone who gets close to the domain, but then you also see fabulous things like when you look at the evolution of the Po Valley and the drought that it had a couple of years ago. You really see the shrinking of some rivers, and that was extremely surprising to me. So seeing from one year to the other how the Po River was shrinking, how some islands were created in the river because of the non-water capability of the zone, and this is incredible. Or you have so many examples. I mean, surprising, there's a lot of surprising things. For me, it was very impactful after 30 years in this domain to go to Greenland 2 years ago with one of the experts that works with us, who's a Danish scientist. He's my advisor for the science community. And this guy has been working in the region for really the last 13 years. So he's really expert. And he said, I have to go to do some measures and let's go together. And we opened the Arctic conference there, but we went to see Greenland. We went to see the fastest moving glacier in the world, which is Ilufshafen. I can hardly say the name. And what was really amazing was we had monitor, and I had seen images of that glacier for the last 30 years, and I saw the shrinking, the going backwards, the reduction of the ice, what is called the kelt, so basically the belt where it ended and where it was shrinking. But to go there, have the corresponding images that you've been seeing to the noise and the speed of the ice melting, so the noise of this ice collapsing and the speed at which this was happening was, we had studied this. We knew about it. It wasn't something new, but what was really new was the strong dimension associated to that when you actually experience it closely. And you realize so much more how important it is and what's happening. It's really dramatic, and you need to have tools and means and also actions on that. So that was something which was striking. In spite, I had always seen the images of that region and the images of that glacier. It was impressive to live that.
Simonetta, how much more detail do we need as humans to start to act? Because it seems like whatever is happening right now on Earth in terms of extreme temperature or weather events, like right now, 50 degrees Celsius temperatures in Italy, then all the wildfires and whatnot. I just got back from a holiday above the polar circle in northern Sweden, and it was next to 30 degrees Celsius for an entire week, which was nice, but still unexpected. So my question to you, we have heard for decades exactly what we're experiencing right now from scientists. So we should not be surprised as a society. And my question to you, how much more detail do we need?
We don't need much more detail. I think we need the continuous use of the factual data we have to make everybody convinced of the seriousness of the matter. We also need this data to have citizens understand that the efforts they make or they will make are paying back. So if you really don't use the car, or if you can see the NO2 reduction in a city during COVID, that was the case. So I think you need factual data, you need to raise the awareness, you need to have policies that can be measurable, and you need to have also information tools like the one we provide to make sure that citizens who make the effort and everybody who makes the effort can see the progress on things. And today, this is really not happening because not everybody is convinced, first of all, of climate change. Even if you live it, that it's a fact of life. I mean, it's something not everybody is convinced that they should take an action on. And I think we need to use at best what we have. You don't need more information. You just need to show the information we have and continuously get it to show the trends.
I did not expect that to happen, but the more we talk about Earth observation, the more I'm falling in love with Earth observation. It's truly, truly interesting because I feel like the potential all this entails, like, for example, if I have that twin Earth project, an idea, and that real-time feedback, I can attach to anything I do as a citizen, I do as a society, to an immediate feedback or an extrapolation into the future from the planet. So, for example, if I want to build a house, I get feedback from that project as to how much this will affect the planet or my region, just my house. Then, for example, if city planners want to extend the city in this and that direction, you get immediate feedback from interpolation into the future, what this does to the region or what it doesn't do. So you can even attach price tags or policy insights to all of this. So this is giving the Earth a literal third dimension or multiple new dimensions when it comes to decision making. This is really, really interesting. Sorry if I'm just realizing what your everyday work is right now. So I'm just realizing as we speak.
Our everyday work is to build the satellites, make sure they work, make sure the data are getting to the users, make sure that people realize. And so we demonstrate the relevance of the use of those data in different domains. One day we work with the petrol company to show that they can monitor the leaks of methane from pipelines. One other day we work to demonstrate that when you build a railway, you can use interferometric data to make sure you don't go on an area which is shaking. Another day, we use those data to make sure that we monitor the green areas in cities. Another day, you make sure you give the data to the fisherman that knows the temperature of the sea before he goes out. So the variety of domain, it's enormous. And I'm convinced that more and more the variety of the use of these data and the recognition of the relevance, because it's not space as space. I mean, it's really what you can do with it in terms of benefiting sectorial areas, thematic areas. Insurance, we work with an Austrian insurance company since years, and we've worked to demonstrate with them how they can reimburse the farmers in 48 hours, which is their actually pride, all over the Central European Eastern region when there is a hail. And this was a demo product that we did together, and we defined it together because we didn't know really what they needed as an insurance company. We knew what we could take and contribute with the data set. This is the beauty of the work that we are doing to try really and make relevant the use of what we built and exploit the data that are available. And it's fascinating because every day you can go into a new domain, not just the traditional ones. Today we see more and more banks that are using these data to assess if there is a risk, or even agencies that sell houses, if there is an area which is risk to be flooded or risk to be in an earthquake. So this is becoming daily part of what we do. And this is also in our mandate to promote the validation, the demonstration of the relevance of these technologies and these data.
This is nothing new to you, of course, but there is, I think it dates back to the 60s or 70s, the Gaia idea that the Earth is a living entity in itself. So whatever you may think about something like this, we're getting somewhat closer to getting an image of a living entity, of a living planet through those data points. So I think this is an interesting and very valuable image to get, because then the Earth is not just a rock floating in space. It's something that changes. It's something that's alive. And it's something that reacts to what we do as a species on this planet. So I think if done right, and this is where educational institutions and smart ways of storytelling come in, if this is done right, this could be a wide-ranging Copernican moment for humanity. If we understand that this place we live on and we live in is not a rock, it's a place that is alive and that suffers and reacts to how we treat it.
Yeah, we do continuous education actions, competitions. We also try to integrate what is called Earth observation in the curriculum of the schools, making arrangements with ministries in the various ESA member states so that from school kids up to higher school kids, people realize the relevance. They also get used to understand, but they also get motivated to study these domains. And we are really encouraging studies of STEM. We do this in many ways. We have a super nice website. We have education tools. We do competitions. And this is really part of also our daily job and mandate beyond the technical scientific one that we have. And I think It's really part of the DNA of ESA to encourage, studies in science, but also encourage the young generation to really understand what's all about. And that's part of what we daily do. I mean, in our job, it's not the core, but it's an essential part of what we do in our job. Like I opened the center to general public since 2 years. It's quite a big effort because you have security constraints and everything. But it wasn't just enough to have only the scientists and the industrialists and the decision maker coming. We need to get the students. We need to open to the public, let them understand what we're doing. And so that's part of the daily job what we try to do in the agency.
So if people who are listening right now want to learn more about Earth observation and what you do in Frascati in Italy, what should they do? Where can they go? If they're not in the vicinity, if they cannot travel to Frascati, how can they immerse themselves and get more information about Earth observation?
First of all, we have Earth observation at ESA managed on 4 sites. So the headquarters is, as you say, in Frascati, with teams working on the data, the application, the distribution of the data. But those building the satellites are in Holland, in the Netherlands, in Estec, in one other facility of ESA. Those working on the climate variables are in the UK, near Harwell, at this Harwell place, and then also in Paris in headquarters. So the best way is either to benefit, if you are near the site, to our open days, which we organize on all ESA sites. They're advertised on our webpage, or go at the occasion of Researchers' Night. Like, for example, we'll have a Researchers' Night opening the site to the public here in Frascati end of September. If you cannot do any of that, the best way to get closer is to look at our website. And we have a lot of information, which is for general public, which is also for scientists, for those who want to dig into the domain, who want to understand the science results of our mission. It's also for users, for those who want to understand better how they could use this data, who is actually improving the forecast about air quality in London, or who is doing what on another area. And I think you can get a lot of information through our website at ESA. And I would suggest and advise to do that. And of course, we have a lot of the centers which also have visitors area or science agreements with Science Museum. In the Netherlands, we have a Space Expo, which is just outside our facility. Everybody can visit. Or we have a lot of what we do is displayed at the European Parliament in Brussels, at the European Parliament Visitor Center in Rome. Or we have in Prague a new facility in the museum there. We have also recently opened a demo of what we do at the museum in Vienna. And so there are many other ways, but I would suggest to start from the ESA website and the ESA Center's connection to get closer to what we do.
If I had a brilliant idea around Earth observation data and I wanted to build a startup around it, could I play with the data? Could I tap into the data? Is there an API into what ESA is observing?
We have what we call the Phi Lab, which is an innovation facility, which is in Frascati. It's actually inspired from the model of the Silicon Valley, of having expertise in this domain, coupled with access to venture capital, coupled with the speed, the contractual fast activities, where we host also people who want to come and stay maybe 3 months or 6 months to understand better how they can use EO data for maybe their model of commercialization or activity afterwards. And that's really, I would say, the core place where we organize that work of support to commercialization in Earth observation. We have there the expertise. We also have calls. We had recently a call on innovation using Earth observation data. So there are calls that you can see also on the web related to that. But certainly getting closer to what we call the Phi Lab at Esrin is the best way to do it. And we have initiated a lot of support to new startups. I think of companies like Aurora Tech in Germany, who are building satellite constellations to do fire monitoring, and many new value-added companies in sectors like methane monitoring. We have one in France working with us, Kairos. We have so many that have gotten closer, gotten the support in terms of expertise, in terms of advice, in terms of starting up their business and looking at business model, also teaming up with other European companies. And that we do through the Phi Lab.
Simonetta, your office manager told me she needs to be super strict about ending this. So my last question to you: if the call came, would you want to travel into space? Would you personally want to go?
I'm scared to death by planes. I'm obliged to take the plane almost every week for work and for pleasure sometimes. I'm really afraid of flying, and I'm not the most fit to go. So I'm not the one motivated to go up on the sky on the space station. And
You're not the one motivated, but let's assume someone is forcing you to go because someone says we're building an Earth observation data center on the moon, and we need Simonetta to take a look at it.
I will delegate.
My question.
It's good to delegate sometimes. I'm sure I will.
My question to you, Simonetta, the journey to those places is long and boring. What's the one piece of music you would not want to miss on that journey to keep you entertained?
Take me to the moon.
Fantastic. So I'll put it on a playlist on Spotify. And the very last question, I challenge you now to share an espresso for the mind with me. What could be an inspiring shot of inspiration you would like to share with me, with the audience?
Well, give a look at the last image we acquired last week on sea temperature in the Mediterranean from Sentinel-3. You'll be inspired.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Simonetta, for taking the time and sharing that truly inspiring work you do.
Thank you, and good luck for the work. See you soon. Ciao. Thank you.
As we wrap up this episode of the Space Cafe podcast, I invite you to consider how Earth observation offers not just data, but a voice for our planet. A real-time reflection of how our actions shape the world we live in. If this conversation with Simonetta Cheli sparked new thoughts or shifted your perspective, we'd love to hear from you. Write us at podcast@SpaceWatch.Global or take a moment to rate and review the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Your feedback helps us reach more people. It's as simple as that, who care about the future of our pale blue dot. You can find all episodes of the Space Cafe podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SpaceWatch.Global. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn for updates. Until next time, my friends, keep looking up and stay connected to the home we all share. Bye-bye.